Hello everybody, I'm going to do one final Whizbang workshop videos. I did all the star ratings, I even went above and beyond. I did some from the core set as well, and the event cards. For Showdown in the Badlands, I did this also video of the most impactful cards, I think, of the set, which isn't necessarily the same as the star rating of the card, because the way I did the star ratings was, how good do I think this deck is going to be? In terms of impactful, what do I mean? I actually went back and checked the original video to see what I actually meant. It was basically cards that will twist the game around themselves. Like, new archetypes will form around these cards. They might not work, but you will build decks to, basically around this card, right? Anyway, first and foremost, let's give some honorable mentions. My 4 honorable mentions here are for Malefic Rook, Blind Box, Alonius, and Chemical Spill. Malefic Rook, I think, could go into some sort of very, very aggressive Warlock deck. People are poo-pooing this card. If you're an aggro Zoo deck, you don't care about hitting yourself in the face for 5 damage. Who cares? All you care about is this 5 damage might push your opponent's face. And this into, I think it's called Waste Disposer, right? The one that discards the bottom of your deck. That is an unbelievable ramp from 3 to 4. If you start with an Imp as well, a 1-mana 3/2 Imp that, does a few damage to your face as well, who cares? That is disgusting. I think Zoo Warlock could realistically be a very dangerous deck. I do think it's missing a few cards right now. But maybe this slots into the... Maybe it slots into the Toxic Sludge deck, so I think there might be a more aggressive Warlock deck than the Sludge Warlock deck. If there is, it's this card that will cause it. But actually, I think there's going to be a little bit too less for me to give it a very good rating on its own, if you know what I mean. I mean, I gave it a good rating, right? Malefic Rook. I'm probably the biggest Malefic Rook believer, but I don't think the Zoo deck will quite get there. Blind Box, I think if Demon Hunter is going to work, this is the card that will cause it to work. Random demons means you can get the Warlock demons, which means you could get Sargarius. If you can discover Sargarius, then suddenly that demon deck isn't as big a meme as people are thinking it's going to be. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on the consistency by which you can get Sargarius. I'm not convinced it's going to be consistent enough, so I put it in the honorable mention section. Alonius might surprise you, but I have some more references to the Spell Damage Druid later on in the rating, spoilers. And I actually don't think Alonius is the most important card in that deck, weirdly. If that deck is going to live, it just needs to live till the late game for it to work, so I probably would have slotted Alonius in at 11, but I only wanted to go to 10. And then finally, Chemical Spill. You might be saying why Chemical Spill. People have poo-pooed this card as well. I think solely for this interaction with Garrosh. People are going to be so scared about it that they'll just start slotting this little warrior package into their warrior decks of Chemical Spill, pulls a Garrosh out of your hand, and you smoke them for 10 damage. That is going to be really obnoxious playing against warrior. Anyway, to the actual top 10 cards. At number 10, Shudder Block. I funnily have nearly put this out of the top 10 as well. I really like the card. I think it's very strong. I think it's going to go into a very strong deck, aka Highlander Shaman. But Highlander Shaman was already a thing. I don't think this card is going to make or break the Highlander Shaman deck. It was already good. But it's going to make it even better. It's going to elevate it from what could have been the low tier 2 threatening tier 3, pushing tier 1 decks, I think. I don't think it quite goes all the way to the top, but it's going to be, there or thereabouts. And it's going to be thanks to Shudder Block. Number 9, Boom Wrench. Again, I think this mech warrior deck will be a thing. I think the critical mass of random damage to random enemies is just there, but I think the thing that takes it over the edge isn't actually the minions themselves, it is the Boom Wrench. And more specifically, it is the mini Boom Wrench. You proc your Boom Wrench, you're smoking him in the face, you get a trigger of your Death Rattle of your... I think it's 8 damage to random enemies, right? Then you play the 1/1 weapon next turn, you break that instantly. Or you even break this a turn early to get the 8 damage out early. I think it's just going to be so much pressure. It's gonna put people into a situation where it's I can't kill this minion, otherwise I will die. And it's going to feel really nasty to play against. And I think, as I said, the big thing that's going to make this archetype work, other than the minions, of course, they obviously need the Death Rattle minions. More specifically, good Death Rattle mech minions. But it's this card that ties the entire package together. Very good card. Position 9. In terms of cards I don't think will actually work, but again, twist the meta slightly, I think Raza decks aren't going to work. I don't think that we are at the critical mass of cards yet to allow Raza to machine gun people down, either via Reno or via Hedonis OTK decks. That being said, I think any deck that puts Raza will obviously lower the curve of their deck. I think it's more likely to be in some sort of control value priest deck. But as I said, you're going to want some zero-cost spells. You're probably going to put Love Everlasting in there as well and trying to get the refreshes off cheap spells. So yeah, I put it in position 8. I think people will play with it, but it won't get to that higher level. But as I said, this is the most impactful one, so it doesn't matter if the deck doesn't work. At least for the next cycle, people will try and make this card work. And eventually Raza will work, right? Surely eventually they'll print enough low-cost cards that Raza Priest will be a deck. Similarly, I have Time Winder Zarima, and the only reason I put Zarima ahead of Raza is I'm not sure they're actually going to print too many more dragons. There's probably going to be a few more dragons in the next coming years. But in the short term, I think this is kind of like the dragons you're going to get. Similar to the dragon package for Druid, they didn't really print any more dragons from then on, right? We've got a few, not too many though. Zarima has an extremely powerful effect. It's the effect of Open the Waygate. Open the Waygate causes misery to... I don't know how many people are playing Wild right now, but thousands of people playing Wild right now. That being said, this isn't Mage, it's Priest, and I just don't think Priest will have the burst damage. That being said, do I think we're going to see a bunch of Dragon Priests on the opening day? Yes, I do. But I think once all the dust settles, it's going to slot into like the tier 3 range. Maybe high in the tier 3 range, but it's not going to be the tier 2 deck. It just doesn't have the burst damage needed to smoke the opponent down. At 6, this is kind of my reference to Spell Damage Druid. I think if Spell Damage Druid is going to work, the card that makes it work is actually this, Woodland Wonders. It is actually completely busted if you can have spell damage on the board, which I appreciate. If you follow the chain of command, might mean the location is the most impactful card, but I think this is kind of more to the point. It's not the location that does it. It's kind of the combination of the location. Maybe I should have put them both together. But yeah, the location plus Woodland's Wonder. If on turn 2 you can get out 2 1/5s for 2 mana, that is backbreaking for any deck that plans to be aggressive for you. You're going to be able to stabilize in the early game. You're not going to take 30 damage to the face and die before you get the combo off. It will let you live a little bit longer to get into this late game where you can start playing some more of your big important cards. This is the class archetype of Druid. They want to reach the late game. They're more of a late game play, whether that's big minions or combo pieces. That's kind of been their classic thing, right? And this card is insane. This card will help them get there. And I actually think, as I said, the Aloni stuff, that's really good. But if they had nothing to live through the early game, then the deck would have been awful. I think the thing that's actually going to put them into around this tier 2 range, and I don't think it's going to be high in tier 2, is this card. I think this is really insane. It's potentially 12 stats for 2 mana. How can that be bad? Anyway, obviously the way it's bad is if you don't find spell damage, in which case it's not great. Number 5, Galactic Projection Orb. Again, there are debates whether this card is good or not. I've rated the Minionless Mage deck pretty highly. I think it's going to slot around tier 2. It's extremely hard to predict though because it is random spells, so it really depends on the random spell pool in the game. Which, to be honest with you, I can look through all the spells in the game in Standard, in the core set, and it's just going to be gut feeling, right? When you get to play this more often than not, you'll see how often the Galactic Projection Orb wins the game for you, because this is really your win condition. You're hoping to win the game after you play this card. If you don't win the game after playing this card, 90% of the times, then obviously this deck is going to be bad. That being said, again, it's kind of irrelevant. This is the most impactful cards. I definitely think you're going to get Minionless Mage decks. This is going to twist into a completely different archetype. It's a really big pull. I think the other cards that are, have no minions in the deck are pretty decent. I think the Yogg is fine, although it did stutter in the Theorycraft stream apparently a few times. Yeah, I think the package is pretty decent. I'd be surprised if this wasn't a reasonable deck. I don't think it's going to be tier 1. I can see a world where it's not tier 2 as well as it's tier 3, but I don't think it's going to be one of these decks that is just absolutely awful. We're going to be looking out again in the future for good mage spells. Number 4, this might surprise you. I think Face Hunter, or this tokeny Face Hunter, is going to be a thing. I think it's going to be a tier 2 deck. And I think the most menacing card out of all of them, and I nearly did the RC card, I can't remember his name again. I actually think it's Jungle Gym. I think this is so spooky for any deck playing against it. If you're trying to play this aggro matchup, This card is a nightmare. If they play the RC remote control card, summon 6 guys, and because you have Jungle Gym on the board, of course, and then you just suddenly do 7 damage randomly against all your enemies, that is a huge tempo swing. If you're a control deck, you do not want to take 7 damage to the face. That hurts around, turn 4. So yeah, I think it's going to be the damage from this card. And it gets 3 uses. The damage of this card, the swarming potential, just the continuous face pressure after face pressure. I think if Face Hunter is going to work, this is the card that makes it work. It's just going to cause your opponent to play less optimally because they just can't keep taking the damage. So yeah, I think Face Hunter will be a thing. It wasn't really a thing until now. And this is probably going to be the most menacing, as I said, of the cards in that deck. Now we get to the top 3. Ziliax Deluxe 3000. I'm not going to lie, he kind of climbed the rankings because this is a card that I think is going to slot into many decks. Many decks. It's not really twisting around it, although you may put some cards into your deck to synergize with Ziliax, like some shooter cards so you can pull your own Ziliax out. It is also a mech, so maybe you put something magnetic in it to magnetize the Ziliax. That type of thing. It's kind of a little bit twisted for me to say this one compared to the other cards where I'm like, the archetype's going to evolve around this card. I think this card deserves a high impact rating because it's going to be in every deck. I see this as like Astalor. And Astalor was in at one point, I think, 60% of all decks out there. Will Ziliax hit 60%? I don't think he will. I think he's a little bit more niche than Astalor. But he's still going to be, 3 cards left in your deck. I need to put a card in. Throw in Ziliax, and you're probably not going to go far wrong. Number 2, Ensmollen from Druid. Again, this could be in the combo section of Druid. I think this card is the bee's knees. I think if Druid is going to be a tier 1 deck at any point again in the near future, it is this card that will cause it. It is so unbelievably good. Why ramp when you can pull the minions down instead? That's kind of like a ramp, right? It's more menacing than that because, obviously, eventually, if you ramp to 10, you're capped, right? Well, other than audio, but that takes you until 11. Or if you're a wild player and you go up against Guff, 20, of course. But yeah, you're eventually capped by the ramp. Ensmollen isn't capped by ramp, right? It's capped by the number of minions in your deck. So I think any combo deck is going to love this card because normally you don't care about the attack of the minion. You only care about its effect. Which means that you're basically getting a 1-mana discount on all your combo pieces. And this is going to enable some really obnoxious combos like the Alonius one. Even beyond that, though, I think if you're running some sort of aggressive deck, I can even see this going into Dragon Druid just to lower the curve. Because do you really care about your taunting Golem Dragons having 1 less attack if you could get it off on turn 6 instead? I don't know. That's a really big tempo swing when you play that. And the earlier you can do these things, the harder it is for your opponent to respond to it. And because of that reason, I think Ensmollen is going to be so frightening. If your opponent coins Ensmollens again, good luck to you because you're going to be in a world of hurt, I think. And in fact, the thing that might limit this card is the ability for Druid to draw cards. And Druid is normally pretty good at drawing cards, so yeah, watch this space. And finally, number 1, it's Sonya. It had to be Sonya. It's so big, the gap between 1 and the rest. It's insane. I think this card is going to be tier 1. Oh, sorry, it's going to be in a tier 1 deck. I think, and this is calling it very early, this card is going to be nerfed pretty quickly as it seems unbelievably broken. Just like looking at the Theorycraft streams, most times when people play Sonya, the thing that stopped them winning was the animations playing from Sonya. It wasn't the card itself, which is always, that's always a laugh, right? When you have the amount of damage you need, but the combo of playing your 1-cost card and the animation playing to get the 0-cost version limits how many cards you can play per turn. Very fun, very good game design there, Blizzard. But anyway, people eventually get very quick at this. They'll recognize immediately, I only need this, and card to do this amount of damage. And by that point, you'll start playing it faster and faster. There's also multiple ways to abuse this card, which is the other nefarious aspect of it. Not only could you build a giant weapon, I think that is probably going to be the most common use of Sonya. You can also generate a giant board of pirates. You can also do some fun stuff with Bounce Around featuring Garona and Leroy. There's just so many ways this card can combo to kill your opponent that I just don't see a world where this is a tier 1 deck. It's just, Not possible! It's frankly not possible. As a result, Rogue is going to go from this mining rogue deck, and I think most of the decks will twist to incorporate Sonya into the package in some way. Will you still have any of the mining stuff? Maybe. There might be a little bit of the mining. There might still be this alternate world where you excavate and you get the excavate treasure. And if Sonya doesn't quite do it for you, you only do 28 damage and not 30 damage. Maybe you try and finish him off with some mining. Maybe the mining even just lowers your opponent's health so it improves your reach. So you're no longer beholden to the animation timer. Maybe that's going to be the case. Either way, insane card. Insane. Anyway, that's it. The Whizbang Workshop set reveals are over. The star ratings, they're over. My impactful card video over. The set comes out later on, and I'll hopefully be streaming it if I'm feeling well enough, which... no, but I'll do my best to play it later, and we'll try and go through some decks. Let me know in the comments below what decks you're most looking forward to, and I'll see you later on, hopefully. Bye!